Hi, this is Remembering the Past, the show where we talk about people who've died recently who've had a profound effect on our history, our society, or our culture. And tonight we're going to start out with Zhores Medvedev, who died recently at the age of 93, one day after his 93rd birthday. He was a Soviet biologist, writer, and most importantly, dissident. He was a gadfly in the Soviet system. But being a gadfly in the Soviet system is not like being a gadfly here in the U.S. He was declared insane, put in mental institutions, and stripped of his Soviet citizenship before his reputation was restored. What was his crime? Well, he exposed Soviet lies about nuclear accidents, about the Soviet prison camps and Alexander Solzhenitsyn, but most importantly, in his book The Rise and Fall of T.D. Lysenko, he exposed the Lysenko affair, almost certainly the most notorious episode in history of state control of science which led to the death of tens of millions of people. To illustrate the importance of Zhores Medvedev, we're going to have a retelling here of the Lysenko affair for younger people who may not be aware of it.
The Soviet Union, for almost 30 years, denied the reality of the theory of genetics that Gregor Mendel demonstrated in the 19th century. It starts with a young scientist, Trofim Lysenko, born in 1898, in a time of turmoil, a revolution, a world war, the rise of a new government, and a new leader. He attends university in Kiev, begins working on the family business of agriculture. Soviet agriculture is in shambles thanks to failed collectivist reforms, part of Stalin's first five-year plan. Stalin took land forcefully from kulaks, the relatively wealthy landlords who owned the farms, and gave it to the people, the batraks and bednyak peasants, who worked the land as a collective. This disruption in traditional roles led to greatly reduced crop yields and livestock. Over 11 million people died in the resulting agricultural chaos in the early 1930s. Lysenko, at the age of 29, makes an important discovery about wheat. There are two types of wheat being grown at the time. Spring wheat can be planted in the spring, and it puts down roots and is ready for harvest in the late summer or early fall. Winter wheat is planted in the fall and spends the winter in the cold ground, in the vegetative state, and only puts out heads of wheat after 30 to 60 days in near freezing temperatures. Winter wheat is hardier, richer in protein, and has higher yields. The problem comes in the near freezing states. An extra cold winter can kill the winter wheat. The discovery Lysenko made was a process he called gerovization. He took winter wheat seeds and chilled them and soaked them for up to 60 days. This made them behave like spring wheat. They could be planted after the ground thawed, germinate, and immediately produce heads for harvest. Failed winter crops, frozen dead in the ground, could then be rescued by his process of gerovization of a seed stock. This was actually a process that farmers had used since the 1800s, under the name vernalization, but it wasn't widely known in Soviet academic circles, so it looked like a new discovery. Where Lysenko goes off the rails is in his rejection of the new field of genetics. At the same time he's chilling his wheat seeds, major discoveries are being made by geneticists in the Soviet Union, Europe, and the US. Unfortunately, Lysenko rejects the new knowledge and Mendel's laws, largely because he doesn't understand them well. He supposes that plants have a will, all working for the betterment of their community. Plants that fail and die are laying down their lives for their plant brethren, working for the common good. He is identified by the Soviet High Command as matching a profile, a desirable person. He comes from a peasant background, a man of the people. His theories promise to deliver immediate gains in crop yields when people are starving to death in the streets. His theories promise more food next year, not 10 years from now, which has great propaganda value. The core philosophies of Lysenko align well with Soviet thinking, collectivism, and strength acquired from adversity. The narrative they can sell to get the workers into the fields, a sense of hope that Soviet science and technology could overcome the limitations even of nature. By 1940, Lysenko's friendship with Stalin led to his appointment as director of the Soviet Institute of Genetics. And through his influence, he marginalized or even fired scientists who dissented. Some ended up in gulags in Siberia. Others simply switched fields and careers. And some came into line with official Soviet policy. Soviet biology was frozen in time. Lysenko's influence began to decline with the death of Joseph Stalin in 1953. The new leadership were more open to alternatives, and leading scientists were eager to voice their long-suppressed opposition. During a General Assembly vote in 1964 to confirm a supporter of Lysenko, one scientist opposed on the grounds that he is responsible for the shameful backwardness of Soviet biology and of genetics in particular, for the dissemination of pseudoscientific views, for adventurism, for the degradation of learning, and for the defamation, firing, arrest, even death of many genuine scientists. By 1965, in light of growing opposition and political embarrassment, Lysenko was removed from his post in disgrace. One of the most lasting and tragic legacies of Lysenko was his establishment of an 8-point agricultural plan adopted in the Soviet Union, leading to starvation and deaths of up to 15 million citizens. And in China, where it caused perhaps twice that number, 30 million Chinese citizens dead, and legacies of malnutrition and want.
Well, by way of introduction of our feature tonight, there's this.
Stop! That's enough. You are a genius.
The guy playing that fiddle was a genius, and that was Roy Clark, who died recently at the age of 85. All right, let me make it clear here. Most people know Roy Clark from the obituaries as the guy who hosted Hee Haw, or the guy who sang Yesterday When I Was Young. We actually did that a couple of weeks back when we did the Charles Aznavour podcast. Mickey Mantle asked for Roy Clark to do it at his funeral. But I'm not going to talk too much about those things. I'm going to talk about the greatest string musician in our lifetime. First of all, Roy Clark might have been the greatest guitarist in our lifetime. Guys like Clapton, Hendrix, Van Halen, they could only dream of doing what Roy Clark actually did. Maybe Chet Atkins or one or two others, but Roy Clark is definitely in the top 5. Not only is he in the top 5 as a guitarist, he's in the top 5 as a banjo player. And as you heard in that introduction, he could play the violin or the fiddle to a level where he was asked to play at Carnegie Hall. You could count the number of people who could do all those things on one hand and still have 4 fingers left over. Anything with a string, Roy Clark could play. Mandolin, ukulele, he could play at a virtuoso level. And the people in the industry knew there was no one else like Roy Clark. Before I show you how good he was, here's Nashville TV, and we'll quickly go through the details of his life.
Now here's Roy and Loretta. He came into your home for 3 decades. You can't think about the popular television show Hee Haw without thinking about Roy Clark. He was born in Meherrin, Virginia in April of 1933. Like his father, Clark learned to play the guitar, fiddle, and banjo. The family performed together throughout Clark's teenage years. By the time he turned 20, he had played several clubs and toured with Grandpa Jones. Roy Clark went on to play lead guitar for Jimmy Dean, Wanda Jackson, and Hank Thompson. But his musical talent and flair for comedy proved he was destined for even greater things. After going on Johnny Carson's Tonight Show with Jimmy Dean in the early 1960s, Clark was noticed in Hollywood. He signed to Capitol Records and even went on to have a recurring guest role on the Beverly Hillbillies. But his big claim to fame would come in 1969 with the start of a show set in Cornfield County. He began co-hosting Hee Haw with Buck Owens, and his popularity soared. And for years, that show was taped right here in our News Channel 5 studio and broadcast all across America. Not only was he on television weekly on Hee Haw, but Clark appeared in numerous television shows and commercials in the 1970s and 80s, all the while putting out albums and gaining fans all over the world. In 1987, Roy Clark joined the Grand Ole Opry, just a few years after he opened his own theater in Branson, Missouri. He became a member of the Country Music Hall of Fame in 2009. Clark also gave back, known for various philanthropic adventures, even having part of St. Jude in Memphis, named after him. From visiting your home each Saturday night to singing and playing you a song on the radio, Roy Clark brought love, laughter, and kindness to the world, and he definitely leaves it a happier and brighter place.
Like I say, you wouldn't know he's one of the great virtuosos of the 20th century. Here he is on the Jimmy Dean Show, and on live television in a little over 2 minutes he played an electric guitar, banjo, and fiddle without a break. And listen to the quality. You want to know how good Roy Clark was? Even the best knew he was the best of the best. We did the Glenn Campbell podcast and talked what a superlative musician he was. Here they are together playing Ghost Riders in the Sky, just an unholy duo. And even Glenn Campbell defers to Roy Clark. A lot of people think Buck Trent is the greatest banjo player in the world. He invented the electric banjo, played with Bill Monroe, born in Spartanburg, South Carolina, just like David Pierce on his podcast we just did. Anyway, Buck Trent and Roy Clark toured the Soviet Union together playing banjos. Here they are playing together, and let me tell you something. I personally think Roy Clark outduels him here. And you ought to hear them when they really get going. Johnny Cash knew a little bit about playing the guitar, but when he did a duet of the Orange Blossom Special with Roy Clark, he let Roy do all the guitar picking.
Roy Clark. Roy plays the guitar.
Here he is doing the same song, the Orange Blossom Special on Hee Haw, except here he's playing the fiddle. Well, if you got somebody else who can do all those things, drop me a line because I want to see that. Well, I'm going to close on that note. I want to thank my producer and IT genius, Sid Tepps. And as a final tribute to Roy Clark, we're going to play a little segment from The Odd Couple. Roy Clark is going to play the classic Malagueña on the acoustic guitar. I'm sorry, you rock guitar fans out there, but there's no way that Hendrix or Clapton could have ever done this. And I'm sorry I can only play a snippet of it, but YouTube would cut it all out if I tried to play the whole thing. But you should look up the entire performance of Malagueña on The Odd Couple by Roy Clark. That 3 minutes is one of the greatest musical performances in the history of television. Segovia never did it better.
Felix, I'm sorry that I messed up your audition.
No, that's all right.
I don't know what comes out. I just have to do it my way.
Right. Listen, now for me. Play some Bach on the guitar.
No more Bach. Will you play my favorite Mountain Dew?
No. Play a nice classical thing,
I
please.
don't want to hear anything class. I want a Mountain Dew.
Wait. Can I do something for myself?
He's entitled.
Are you happy? time they played Bach.